Does the person who painted this picture deserve to be called an artist? Probably not, say the gallery directors at Pine Street Artworks in Burlington, Vermont. But that doesn't mean they don't respect the meticulous results of people who stay within the lines and paint by the numbers. A recent exhibition honored the 1950s phenomenon of paint by number. Art collector Mark Wasco bought the Mona Lisa from Pine Street Artworks. Not the original by Leonardo da Vinci, but a paint-by-number version by Anonymous.
The Mona Lisa is a reasonably horrendous version of the classic. There are a lot of superficial details that are similar, but the picture is certainly lacking in a lot of the grace of the original, or even better copies of the original, and in a way that's kind of part of the charm of it.
Wasco and Mona aren't the only ones smiling in the art gallery. Cartoonist Harry Bliss also enjoys seeing more than 100 paint-by-number works in one room. Bliss's own artwork appears on the pages and covers of the New Yorker magazine. That may explain why he chose to buy this image from the exhibit. It's based on a magazine cover by Norman Rockwell. Bliss says he appreciates the complex color theory of paint-by-number.
It forces you to look at specific areas throughout a composition and to break those down into separate colors. As opposed, there's no blending involved in paint by numbers. It's almost like looking at a digital image up really close. You can see how it's actually constructed because each color is sort of delineated. And you can, within that context, you can see the actual, how the colors interrelate and will bounce off each other, or the rhythm that's created compositionally through those colors.
He says paint-by-number kits can serve as a tool to teach.
This is actually a very good example for people who are sort of learning about color or learning about art in general. And that's one of the great things about paint by numbers, is that you can see that the face is not simply a mannequin. It's not all one color. This face is constructed of all these different colors. There's sort of a greenish highlight here. This one has more yellow in it. There's a very strong highlight here. There's a little gray here. And in the shadow mass, all along here, we're finding a couple different colors that make up the shadow mass, excluding the black. And right in here, we have a wonderful example of reflected light, which is actually light that's coming from this direction, bouncing off something, and then coming back and hitting this side of the Indian's face, also this side of the Indian's nose. This is a wonderful example of how the face is broken down into planes, shapes, and different colors. It's not just one color.
The thing that moved me about paint by numbers was, number one, their charm. I find that the paintings themselves are very charming. They are of an era.
Gallery director Liza Cowan says the internet gave her both the idea for the exhibit and a way to get pieces for it.
And I saw a website that had an article about a person who had taken a paint-by-number picture and enlarged it and made a mural in his living room. And I was so charmed by this picture that it led me to an online search, and I began to explore what it would mean to buy paint-by-number.
Paint-by-number kits became popular in the 1950s, when they sold for about $3 each. Now, completed vintage canvases go for as much as $130. Cowan restricted her search to works from the 1950s and early 60s.
And even back in the 50s, when they were being made, they were made in a way to be nostalgic. The views are nostalgic, the concept is nostalgic. And now looking at them 50 years later, we're having a nostalgia for something that was already nostalgic. Now that intrigues me as a concept.
She collected samples from the major categories of paint-by-number subjects.
I chose for this show several themes. Of course, there are a lot of landscapes, and I chose landscapes that looked like Vermont, the New England type landscapes. I did not choose the Everglades, for instance. I also chose people. I chose dancers, which were very popular, the ballerinas, the harlequin, then we get to the sort of sentimentalized other, the noble Indian and the geisha. I chose only a couple of those. And then I chose a lot of animal images, which were extraordinarily popular. Horses, dogs, and cats, predominantly, not barnyard animals and not particularly wild animals. I haven't seen any. The only non-pet animal I've seen is a sheep, and the sheep is in with a picture of Jesus as the shepherd, which ties into the religious themes, which were huge in paint by number. In fact, the Last Supper is the #1 best-selling image in the whole genre.
The exhibit also features a few complete kits, with paint included. This allows the gallery's assistant director, Christy Mitchell, to try her own hand at the hobby. As a professional artist, she hasn't painted by number since childhood.
My thoughts as an artist today, looking at paint by numbers, is that they look tedious, they look mundane, they look like hard to do. But actually sitting here painting this, it's a lot more fun than I had imagined. It's not as tedious as I thought it would be. It's going quickly. It seems like something that someone who wasn't an artist could do and feel good about doing a painting.
Paint by number, I believe, was developed, well, to sell paint for a paint company. First of all, they wanted to promote and mass market their paints in a new way. The appeal, however, I think was to bring art to the people. Everybody can everyone can paint a masterpiece, no skill required. And that's very appealing.
I can remember as a child doing paint by numbers. So I had this huge sense of satisfaction and creativity and fulfillment in doing this thing, which essentially was a rote activity.
Not everyone went mad over the hobby in the 1950s, and many people considered painting within the lines a craft, not an art.
When they were first made, they were considered vulgar. They were debased. They were bad art. They weren't art, and which I think is part of what's appealing about them.
It was this way of conditioning people that something creative was happening, when in actuality, for most of us, it really wasn't. So in a way, it was kind of like mass delusion, that all of these people at roughly the same time are doing essentially the same thing, and yet each one was doing their own thing.
I think that the people who did them ranged from people who had absolutely no talent to people who were enormously talented, yet might not know it until they had started to do paint by number. That somehow working with paint, there's something about having a paintbrush in your hand and a canvas to be painting on that teaches your hand and your eye to move and to look. And I think that paint by number probably taught that to a lot of people, that there's a thrill in actually painting.
Some critics were less than thrilled, calling paint by number a symbol of the mindless conformity gripping 1950s America.
That they were put together for the express purpose of having the masses do the same picture using the same colors. Nonetheless, every person imbues them with their own strokes and their own particular idiosyncrasies and their particular level of talent or lack thereof.
When I look at all these images, in the gallery here, for me, it's kind of impressive, because it seems like the artists, or whether you could call them artists or not, because they are paint by numbers, but they spent a lot of time. They were really trying really hard to achieve a certain artistic quality in these paint by numbers. And given the world that we live in today and how busy we are, I think that's probably lost.
Just walking into the room, you get a feeling of the era, of the excitement that people had making these paintings. They're fascinating, they're weird, they're kind of kitschy.
People like it. It's, there are a variety of reasons that people like it now. I don't think it's any more art now than it was 50 years ago, but I think with time, the distance of time, and an appreciation of pop culture, that we can see them differently.